regardless of your affiliation in terms of party or ideology, whether you're Democrat, Republican, left, right, libertarian, or Green Party, I think it's important that we can all come together with the realization that the Republican Party in the past 4 years has been consumed by Trumpism. So today's episode is not going to be attempting to analyze who's going to be winning the upcoming election. That's going to be reserved for a future episode of the Paulitics Show. Instead, today's episode is going to be focused on examining the future of the Republican Party in a post-Trump world, or even if Trump wins re-election. So that's the goal of today's episode, to examine what happens to the Republican Party if Biden wins and Trump loses, or if Trump wins and Biden loses. So without any more to say in this introduction, let's jump into it. In order to really dive into this, I believe it's very important to first define what is Trumpism. Because as I said in the introduction, the Republican Party, the modern day GOP since the year 2015, has really been rapidly consumed by Trumpism. So I believe we have to define what exactly that is in order for us to move forward in this discussion, predicting the party of the Republican Party going forward from here on out. So what is Trumpism? Well, in my opinion, it's a combination of 4 different factors: populism, nationalism, strongsmanship, and charisma. And we're going to break down all 4 of those factors throughout today's episode. But to begin, let's look with populism. And for those of you that don't know what populism is, it's an anti-elitist, anti-intellectual, anti-establishment, and supposedly it's in favor of the common people. Now, many have called Trump a populist. Many people have called Ted Cruz a populist. But on the contrary, you also have people calling Bernie Sanders a populist. Anti-establishment, anti-intellectual, anti-elitist vibes are given off via the campaign and a promotion of the common good for the majoritarian. And these are fervors that exist within the United States. We are in the modern era, over the last decade, a country that has become anti-intellectual, anti-elitist, anti-establishment. Because as I've covered in the last few episodes regarding freedom of speech, regarding campaign finance laws, the American people are slowly realizing that they're being screwed over. According to a poll, 70% of Americans think that the American system is rigged. That's an overwhelming majority. The overwhelming majority of Americans don't have faith in institutions. They don't have faith in Congress. They don't have faith in the president. They don't have faith in the Supreme Court, nor do they have faith in our bureaucracies. The American people are slowly and truly losing their faith in American institutions. And they're also anti-elitist. They're anti-intellectual as well. We see the term elitist being thrown around and establishment being thrown around if you listen to mainstream media. Those are the terms you'll hear when we're talking about establishment figures. People like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. People that have been in there for decades at this point. Those are the establishment figures that people are starting to not get behind as much. And we're seeing this with establishment type figures being overthrown and replaced with new young blood, such as what happened in New York's 14th district with the victory of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez versus Joe Crowley in 2018. But we also have a variety of other factors when it comes to Americans being anti-elitist and anti-intellectual. The majority of the American people don't have faith in the education being provided to the youth in today's universities and higher level education. So they're anti-intellectual, they're anti-elitist, anti-establishment. They want to throw all of what has been established by American society out the window because they feel, and to an extent they are, being screwed over. Institutions have declined. We've seen this under the Trump presidency. But institutions have declined. The daily press briefing that presidents would do in the past have been reserved now to the daily tweet. Resignations and firings of White House officials, of bureaucratic officials, is no longer done via White House official statements. It's done via those officials finding out on Twitter, finding out when doing interviews for the very administration that they were previously working for. That's when it's been done. These people aren't told ahead of time. They're not being told by White House official statements. We're being told by a president who's tweeting it out. So we see that, throughout his presidency, regardless of whether or not that he governs like a populist, he is declining those very institutions that people despise. But populism, another part of populism, is this bringing together of the common people. It creates an us versus them mentality. So when he says that he wants to bring together the people, it's a very distinct picture of what us looks like. In Trump's America, it doesn't include people from other countries, and we're going to get into his national populism later, because that's a subsect of his populism. But when we look to the us versus them, he wants to do stuff for the common people. So he's pointing out these corrupt politicians. He says that he can bring back these millions of jobs, that he can stop jobs from being outsourced like he said he was going to do with the carrier air conditioning. When he says things like that, it provides a sense of working for the common people, helping them, something the establishment has not done because they vote for things like NAFTA and CAFTA and normal permanent trade relations with China. The outsourcing of jobs, well-paying jobs, good-paying jobs. We can get into whether we can then dissect the fact of that actually Donald Trump has outsourced more jobs than Obama has. We can have that whole different discussion another day. But this is what he campaigns on. He campaigns on working for the common man. He's saying it's us versus them. Us, the common people, versus them, the elite, versus them, the intellectuals, versus them, the establishment. And by creating and fomenting this division, what happens is you build political caricatures of those that disagree with you. So, for instance, when he calls the media, which is an institution, which is an establishment institution, a necessary part of democracy, when he calls them the enemy of the people, that's fomenting division, which ultimately separates the country, that we eliminate, we know what facts are, because it creates that us versus them. It creates a tribalist feel where you don't trust the institutions anymore, because you're being told that they are not one of us. They are against you. They are working against you. The media is working against you. That is tribalism at its core. That's the us versus them that Trump creates when he espouses that the Democrats want to destroy the country. I know that we live in hyper-partisan times. I know that John McCain and Mitt Romney are our last hopes of, bringing back together a country where we can at least have civil discussion. I can think that Mitt Romney and John McCain don't have a single good policy. But at the very least, they're willing to negotiate. They're at the very least willing to work with the other side of the aisle. When Trump goes ahead and says that Democrats want to destroy the country, inherently making them not one of us, in that us versus them mentality, what he's really doing is he's fomenting division, fomenting hate towards the Democrats, saying that if you do not subscribe to my ideology, you are one of them, and by innate fact, they are against us. The Democrats are against us. The media is against us. The rhinos, Republicans in name only, like he called Mitt Romney and Pat Toomey the other day, are against us. That's what he's doing. He's fomenting division via this populism that inherently creates an us versus them mentality. But as I said, there's another form of populism called national populism. And national populism creates an anti-globalist and xenophobic policy. So in addition to the establishment and institutions and intellectuals and elites being one of them against us, the majoritarian, he is now implying that to the rest of the international. He is saying that global institutions like the World Health Organization, the International Criminal Court, the World Trade Organization, are one of them and are inherently working against us, the forgotten man and woman that he said in his inauguration will never be forgotten again. He tries to connect with them at this personal level. Despite being this bombastic billionaire, he has pulled the wool over the people's eyes and made it seem like he is one of us. He seems and he acts like he's a traitor to his class, when in reality his policies reflect the opposite. So let's get into this us versus them mentality and international. When Trump was campaigning, he kept using this phrase and still uses it today in his policy, America first. And America first at face value may very well seem like a great policy decision. We're Americans. Of course we want to put America first. That's the inherent argument behind America first. But digging a little bit deeper, it becomes a little bit different. Because when you go ahead and create this America first, we are America, we need to put ourselves first. It is America, the true Americans that agree with me, Donald J. Trump, versus the rest of the world. It literally becomes Trump versus the world. Trump and his supporters versus the world. So when he goes ahead and he pulls out of the World Health Organization, an organization, a governing body throughout the world that is attempting to create a cure for the coronavirus, a vaccine for the coronavirus, when he pulls out of organizations like this, what it really does is it hurts people like you and I. But to Trump, it's the World Health Organization versus Trump and his supporters. Back a few years ago, Donald Trump was accused of placing sanctions on Iranian medicines going into Iran. As a result, the International Criminal Court, the ICC, said that he needed to get rid of those sanctions on Iranian medicine going into the country. What did Trump do? He pulled out, because it was the ICC versus Trump, inherently making the ICC bad. What about the World Trade Organization? While we haven't pulled out yet, Trump has expressed interest on multiple occasions of just doing that, pulling out of the World Trade Organization, which would inherently make our trade deals with any other country irrelevant because we'd have no governing body to make sure that they're being upheld. But he's violated the rules on many occasions too, because he wants to put America first. So when you create this mentality, it is America versus the world. It is Trump and his supporters against the world. It's not America versus the world. It's Trump's America versus the world. And that's a perfect distinction that I feel like we have to make. Because we also have to get into his xenophobic policies. When we talk about xenophobia, what that means is it's a fear of people from other places coming into your country. And we can get into if Trump is actually a xenophobe himself or just his policies are, drafted by people like Stephen Miller, who's undoubtedly racist and a xenophobe. But it also places immigrants and people from other nations in that them category as the elites. It places them in that same category. So it truly becomes Trumpism versus the world. It creates a world where if you disagree with Donald Trump, you're the them category, and you're working against the true Americans. And this might seem fairly familiar to you. We've seen these rise of this populist rhetoric, this nationalist populist rhetoric, in many other instances throughout world history. And most of those characters tend to have strongsmanship-like characteristics. So what does that mean? Well, most of the time they're bombastic leaders, and they create these caricatures of their political opponents. So, for instance, this is what Donald Trump does. He calls the media the enemy of the people, inherently making it us versus them. He calls Joe Scarborough, he foments these conspiracy theories. Joe Scarborough might have killed his neighbor. Who knows? That's what stuff that Trump's tweeted. And anyone who speaks out against him, like Rex Tillerson or John Bolton, is a liar, unhinged, dumb as a rock. That's how he treats people who are against him. He also creates caricatures. He says the left is for open borders. Meanwhile, in any of the circles that I'm in terms of liberalism and leftism, I've never heard a single person advocate for open borders. He also says that all the left wants to do is take away every right to your guns. That's also not true. When you exaggerate and you go ahead and create these caricatures of political statements which are inherently false and exaggerations, it furthers that us versus them mentality. Because it says, oh, look, I am going to pin what the left wants to do, what the elite want to do, what the intellectuals want to do. At the end of the day, this is the world's biggest straw man, but based on a deeper argument which divides America. We have been a tribalist country since the Bill Clinton administration with his impeachment scandal. And slowly but truly, we have also been furthered by the Iraq War. We've been furthered by the 2007 recession. We've been furthered by the election of Donald Trump in 2016. And whether or not you dislike or like their policies, I think that's something we all realize. America's falling apart at the seams because we don't have our act together, because we are unable to promote compromise and come to a position where American people, not politicians, American people can sit and have a civil discussion with one another. And like or dislike Trump, he's a divisive figure. And so when you have a man who creates this us versus them, that's what's going to happen. You're going to have a person who says, if you disagree with me, this is what you stand for. And I'm going to create a caricature and I'm going to strawman you into saying what you actually stand for. Open borders, globalist, anti-Second Amendment, anti-free speech, and whatever it might be, whatever his key policies are, you're against them inherently, just because you spoke out against him once. And we see that with even his own party, like I mentioned before, with Mitt Romney and Pat Toomey. He is inherently anti anyone who is against him, unwilling to work with the Democrats, unwilling to work with the rhinos, unwilling to compromise whatsoever. But as part of the strongsmanship, it also has this innate link to egotism. And the egotism aspect is this inability to accept fault of any kind. Now, I personally believe that anyone who is in the position of the presidency is inherently an egotist because they are in the position that they are in. Because they alone think that they can solve the problems, because they think they are the most qualified to be president, therefore making them an egotist. But Donald Trump is special in a certain way, because other presidents can and have admitted fault. Donald Trump can't. Donald Trump can't admit fault that he handled the coronavirus terribly. He can't admit that he was faulted when he said that it was a Democratic hoax, that there wasn't enough testing at first, and that he didn't take it seriously, and that just until a couple of days ago he wore a mask. He can't admit that. But it stems further than that, because if we look back to when Trump was actually campaigning in 2015, I believe it might have been at the Republican National Convention. I'll play it if I have the clip here. But he basically said, I alone am the one who can solve the problems.
Nobody knows the system better than me. Which is why I alone can fix it.
And that he has the best and the brightest people. But he often fires those best and brightest people. So what is it? Do you have the best and brightest? Or do you not? And if you don't, that's okay. You're allowed to grow and make mistakes, and you're allowed to put new people into your cabinet. But just admit that you made a mistake. Because when you project strength like that, it comes off as weakness. And that brings me to my next point, charisma. Trump, like him, dislike him, has something to say about anything, everyone, and anyone. That's the thing about Trump. And that might not make for a good president. We can have that discussion. But what it doesn't make good for is it makes for a good comedian, a good leader. And the American people are so desensitized by politics because at the end of the day, they truly don't understand it because we don't have mandated civics classes. People don't really know about their institutions. Most people can't name you their congressman. Because they don't do that, because they don't have they're ignorant about this issue. What winds up happening is you can have a comedian become president. You can literally have a reality TV show host become president. So where does that leave us in the post-Trump world after November 3rd, 2020? And the fact of the matter is, I would be lying to you if I said I can predict the future. I don't have a crystal ball, and I can't tell you what November 4th, 2020 is going to look like. But what I can tell you is my prediction. And I predict that the Republican Party is going to stay the party of Trump, even in a world where Biden wins 400 electoral college votes. The Republican Party will be and remain the party of Trump for the foreseeable future. You see, the Republican Party is no longer the party of fiscal responsibility. Fiscal conservatism. Because look at Trump's tax cuts, for instance. Look at the deficit that's running this year. We're looking at over a $3 trillion deficit. When we had the Trump tax cuts, we had a $1.5 trillion deficit. The Republican Party is no longer the party of Christian morality. Sure, evangelicals may love Trump, but they can no longer claim to be the morally responsible ones. Just look at Trump's life. Multiple casinos, multiple wives, look at the Billy Bush tape from 2006 or whenever that was. They can no longer claim to be the party of Christian responsibility or Christian morality. To an extent, that also deflects them from being the party of social conservatism. The Republican Party is also no longer the party of limited government. Trump has assigned more executive orders per year than Obama did. That is insane. The Republican Party used to be this party of responsibility, limited government, and morality, but has slowly shifted away. And those that remain, those fiscal hawks, those social conservatives, those Christian moralists, and those who believe in limited government, like Mitt Romney, like John McCain, have been ostracized. John McCain wasn't a hero, Trump said. Mitt Romney is a horrible, terrible person. He's a loser, Trump says. He foments division within his own party and creates a party of Trump. It's no longer the Republican Party. It's the party of creating caricatures of your opponents. It's the party of playing defensive politics. There's no room to disagree. Because if you disagree, you are them. You're not part of us anymore. You are against us, the true Americans. I hope you all today enjoyed today's episode. Next week is going to be the season finale of the Paulitics Show, where we're going to be covering who I believe is going to be winning the upcoming election. So stay tuned for that. But for now, I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. Stay safe, be well, and have yourselves a good one.